Hi friends, this is your boy Dale Happy Knowles. Thinking about biodiversity, environmental protection, and sustainability? Concerned about climate change, food security, and threats to clean air and water? Pause, think about it with intentional thought, and consider where we go from here. Stay tuned and hear what Acting Director of the Forestry Unit, Danielle Hanek, got to say about why building those 1,000-foot sidewalks in the bush and being a good steward for our paradise. Share. Let everybody know we are live. We'll be right back.
Something to think about with Dale Happy Knowles.
Welcome to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. We highlight novel ideas, activities, and people with the goal to stretch our minds and to raise the consciousness for opportunities. Join our co-sponsors, DomDev Enterprises and Page Investments, and our friends at Something to Think About in this discussion. What we think, we become. What we radiate, we attract. And what we imagine, we can achieve. Let's change the narrative 242. So as we mentioned before, this evening we have a special guest, and she is a young lady who is a natural resource manager in the background of forestry, science, and urban geography. Now, you know, these are some big things. Around for 18 years in the civil service, and many divisions or departments from GIS Center, Public Works, the Environmental Center department, and then now, within the Forestry Unit and acting as the director, and so we know that shouldn't be happening for too much longer. We don't believe in acting too much. But we would like to welcome Ms. Danielle Hanek. I say it right, because you know, I say it all kind of crooked ways sometimes.
Hi, good evening, Dale. Good evening, Bahamas. Yes, you are saying it correctly. It's Hanek. Yes.
Hanek,
so think of panic with the ick at the end. Hanek.
Yeah, but okay, cool. So you could cause them to panic if you ain't gonna panic.
No.
Cool.
Well,
now,
thank you.
You're welcome. Now, in school, I always knew that anything with three or more syllables was a big word. So break down that word biodiversity for me.
Yes, it is a big word, and it's been around for quite a while. Actually, in the early 1990s, you have the Rio Convention of Biodiversity. That was a huge game changer in terms of focusing on the environment. And so even this Conference of the Parties, we've been hearing a lot of COP. Recently, there was one in Scotland, and so we are now preparing for COP27 in Egypt this year. And the point of that was we had the very first COP for biodiversity here in 1994. It would have been Crystal Palace back then. And I could remember as a high school student going to see the exhibit there. And so the Bahamas has always been a part of the conversation of biodiversity and conservation and environment. So biodiversity, really what we're talking about is life. We're talking about our variety. So if you think about if you were in business and you were selling a shirt, and if you just had one shirt, let's say you had a black shirt with a earth on it, but let's say the moment that people change ideas or fashions, then you are only selling this one shirt, and then you'll go out of business. But if you sell many shirts and of different sizes, types, colors, you're able to, with the passing trends, you're then able to be in business because you're selling a variety of shirts. So similarly, like with life, with species, so you have genetic biodiversity, species biodiversity, you have ecosystem biodiversity. All of those things basically means you're having a high diverse number of species or variety. And we have that saying, variety is the spice of life. It really is, because with it, you're able to adapt and adjust. And the idea with a healthier ecosystem, with a higher biodiversity, when tragedy hits, let's say like a hurricane or a forest fire, if you had a healthy ecosystem, it will be able to build back better, quote unquote.
Right.
It will be able to bounce back. So that is why. So that is the idea. And we could see an example of, let's say, with our orange, for example, in Apico, we had acres and acres of oranges, but then it had a blight. And then it was wiped out and it was no more. But if you had a variety of species there mixed in, then possibly it is possible that it would have survived even after that. But
Right.
So that's that concept there, referring to variety of living species on Earth, and the concept that, so I'm looking at my notes because, I believe in open book tests. So it's the number of difference of individuals. So basically you have the increase of variety, meaning the healthier the ecosystem. So ecosystems, what does that mean really? So if we look at the pine forest, that is an ecosystem. If we look at the mangrove forest, that is an ecosystem. If we look at the ocean, that is an ecosystem. If we look at our beach, that is an ecosystem. So these are different types of ecosystems that operate together. And they are all interdependent. We may not think so. We're like, whatever we do on land doesn't affect the sea. But much research has shown that, yes, what we do on land affects the sea. And what happens in the sea affects us on land.
Cool. That's awesome, man. Because now you bring everything down to my little level there. Right?
Right.
So yeah. So now my mom and sister, they have this habit of manicuring this oversized garden that we have, which I call bush, right? And so besides the pine forest and I don't know of anything that we've ever had anything called woods. So how we get to have forests?
Right. So forest in a Bahamian term, we can't comprehend it, right? Because we're like, it's just bush. Everything that is green is kind of bush, what we call. But technically, it is a forest, meaning the definition. So the Food and Agricultural Organization, they are the lead on research in regards to forestry. And they have a definition where it's like, okay, 0.5 hectares or just a little bit over an acre. That is if you have the same ecosystem and you have over a certain height, so over 15 meters high, or trees that are 30 feet or taller.
Okay.
That counts as an ecosystem. So what you're looking at is a beautiful pine forest. So to us, we're like, oh, we're scornful of pine. That, you can't eat a pine tree. But I will challenge you. Did you know that they are related directly to our water tables? And why is that essential? Water is the source of life. We could survive without food for a very long time, but survive without water, maybe 3 days, maybe 4. Water is our source of life. And so even though now, especially in New Providence, let's say, we are accustomed to reverse osmosis plants and having fresh water coming from our faucet and not even thinking about it. This is actually a privilege that we have. We don't have to be so concerned about how much water we consume. But if we didn't have reverse osmosis plants, we don't have rivers. We don't have waterfalls. We don't have ice caps that are melting.
Right.
Where would we get fresh water from? And our fresh water is actually in water tables underneath the surface.
Right.
And they are the highest or the most plentiful in our pine forest. And so there's a direct correlation with our pine forest, with our silver top palm, and our cabbage palm, and having the water tables. So I always mix up the cabbage patch and silver top palm. But the silver top palm you would know because that's essential for the straw industry. That's the straw that they use. That is what they harvest to create our handicraft or straw industry. Yeah. So this is what we're looking here. So if you can see, you look like baby pine trees. That's what we call like saplings. Those are our teenager, quote unquote, trees. And then right behind it, so what here you have a multi-generation or multi-level profile of a forest. Yes. Yeah. And so it's not just pine trees, though. You have other species intermingled, like you have your
Right.
five finger, you have your love vine, you have your poison wood, especially. And poison woods are essential, not for humans, because, you break out in
Yeah.
rashes,
Right.
but they're essential for our wildlife, our bird populations, our white-crowned pigeon, which is so prized. A lot of communities rely on white-crowned pigeons, not just for hunting or for sport, but also
Right.
for subsistence. They eat it. And so in communities where there's subsistence living, this is something that is a part of their diet. So ensuring that populations are healthy, we need to ensure that they have food to eat. And for them to have food to eat, we have to conserve their environment.
Right. So now you mentioned these things with the animals and everybody else take from the bush.
Yeah.
I know us to take bush medicine from bush. And so
Yes.
I know of the value that brings to us. And some people even say it carried us through COVID. I don't know if there's any
I would
science
believe
or
that.
proof to that, but I mean, I wouldn't put it past them, right? So how else does bush connect to our health? And why do we need to protect it?
In so many ways. For example, trees are likened to be the lungs of the earth. That is how, at basics, it takes the bad air and it makes good air, right? It takes the CO2 and then it has a process and then it creates oxygen for us. So that it cleans up the earth. It also sequesters the carbon, which means it absorbs the carbon. It helps regulate temperature. The soil and its roots help keep the trees, the roots keep the soil so you don't have that constant dust and breeze and such. And so all of those help or affect air quality when we are what we breathe. So that is a part of that. So and especially during how you mentioned COVID times, I know we did some research in Acklands and Crooked Island, and they have the COVID tea is what they would call it. So mixing the cascarilla bark, mixing what we call rat's tail, or it's really like a blue flower plant. It's escaping me now, but they would do a mixture, right? And they're like, they were drinking it. And if you really look at COVID numbers, there are less than 10 COVID cases in Acklands and Crooked Island. And that's not by chance. So I would say, like, even if persons is saying if they had a cold, they'll drink Kapari and orange juice. I was like, well, it works for some people.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, so those are medicine. It's medicinal. So technically what we call that as non-timber forest products, because it's a product, it is a benefit. It is something that we can transfer into a product and then sell. So bush medicines, medicinal plants, these are essential. And this, there are some who question the source of Viagra, that actually it probably was from a researcher who was clipping plants and took it back to a lab. And the properties of the chemicals, the properties of that drug are similar to the properties that are found in some of our bush medicines, like the 21 gun salute, that concoction that they do. I mean, there is something to that. There is something to that. Because we think, and I think that's the challenge, we don't know how resourceful, what wealth we have in our natural resources. And it's like, oh yeah, you could come and you could take it. And then you don't realize that, okay, they actually take it and they develop it into a drug or a beauty product, like Campari. They develop it into $1 million industry. And the benefits from that are very minimal, if anything.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to get the government to make a special industry, new industry, so that we could benefit from bush medicine and not just allow others to benefit from it. That's work in progress. So we'll see how far we get with that.
Yes.
And so forth.
And to be a part of that, you have to conserve the resource. So recognizing areas that we need to conserve where they grow, because all of these species grow together. It's not just one species. You can't just say, okay, one tree, like this type of tree is fine and you could put it anywhere. No, actually what we're finding is all of the species together have an interdependency. They rely on each other. And then based on that combination, that helps them grow. So that is what we found, what we've been finding with the cascarilla. The cascarilla bark is very particular. It doesn't grow just anywhere. And it always grows around a certain collection of species. Like it always has its group of friends with them, let's say. And wherever you find these group of friends, you will definitely find cascarilla. But if you don't have the group of friends, you'll find that the quality of the cascarilla that you grow changes. And so just as you have a grading system for cacao, which you use for chocolate, you have a grading system for the quality of cascarilla. And in the region, the Bahamas is known as the highest quality of cascarilla that is used for Campari or beauty products. So this is what we've been working on. One of our projects, it's called the Global Environment Facility, the GEF, GEF. It's a funded project, and it's Bahamas Pine Island project. And a part of that is called Sustainable Livelihoods. And a pilot that we're working with, meaning us, the Forestry Unit, is working with Bahamas Agricultural Industrial Corporation, BEIC. They were recently in the news about this research, of doing the research about cascarilla. Because even though people think, and the funny thing is, when you talk to people in Acklands and Crooked Island, they're like, oh yeah, we're rambling in the bush. We're going to go to Samanaki and Planaki to harvest it, right? And you think it's so plentiful. But when you really do the research, and meaning you go in the bush and you tackle, you go rambling and you tackle the haul back, especially. And you go through and then you try to navigate all of the vines and everything, you recognize that it's not so plentiful, that there are very specific areas where it grows. But it can grow in a plantation setting, meaning it can be propagated. So that is what we're going to experiment. So that way it doesn't have to be this big competition. People don't have to risk their lives going over that deep ocean water to Samanaki. But you could have a system where you have a cooperative where you could then harvest it. And within 18 months to 2 years, you could have a decent size, nearly 4 to 5 foot size shrub that is the cascarilla, and harvest it sustainably. So that is something that we're working on.
Yeah. So this is like the ecosystem is like listening to you is like a person's body then, because you have all these different parts that work together and they're all interconnected. And if my back or my neck twists up, then I mean my lower back might hurt, or my thigh might hurt, or my ankle might hurt, or even my big toe, because they all connected together. And
that's a way of putting it.
Yeah,
that's a way of putting it. That's exactly how our Earth is. And I think we have, some of us appreciate the fact that yes, we have to take care of our environment, but we don't really know, how do you do that? Like, what does that really mean? Or why does it really impact me? And I think only when you see events happening, when you see, when you're like, oh, you mean if we remove this bush here, that it's going to have an impact over here? Or you mean that, oh, well, because we've taken away, persons who use the government pump, that is connected to the water table system. And our whole island is connected. And that means that water that is generated in Coral Harbor, Carmichael Road area, persons who go to the pump in Fox Hill or in Adelaide or in Gambia, you're all connected.
Yep. Oh, cool. And so the question I would ask then, do people know the effects of the environment? Like how I know if my ankle hurt, I might have learned that it could be connected to something with my neck and this. Do the people in the Bahamas in general know the impact or the effects of one thing to the other?
I find in my work that communities and persons in, let's say, what we call the out islands, quote unquote, or family islands. Let's say I find communities in Acklands and Crooked Island are very well aware of what the environment, how they live with the environment. So I find, like in Andros, for example, the community in Red Bays, they are very much connected with their environment. They know when they need to harvest silvertop palm. They know when they need to do a fire because they know when crab season is. They know how to connect fishing season. They know when to harvest. So they are aware, and they know that they have to take care of the environment. They know they could only take so much so that they will be able to go back over time, not to take all, and then they won't be able to go back. I find in New Providence, though, we really have to work on connecting our, especially our youth, with the
Right.
environment, because it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like we don't need that. That's just out there. That's for farmers, and they I call when people like call it frou-frou. They're like, oh, that doesn't affect us, but really
Mm-hmm.
it does, and so this is an example of us going to communities and schools and just to teach and show how forests are important, how trees help
Mm-hmm.
us, and how we need trees. Climate change is not to say something sciencey and something scary. No, we as humans need a place to live.
Right.
We want to live above water, I would hope. I mean, it's nice to go in the water once in a while, but you
Mm-hmm.
want somewhere to eat. Sorry, you'd want somewhere to live. You'd want something to eat, And so we've been doing expos and just to promote the fact that yes, we have this. It's not just something that is scornful, but is something useful that we need. And so once you recognize that everything that you wear or where you live, going to the bathroom, even your toilet paper, what you write on,
Right.
all these are products that are generated from trees.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope you don't write on toilet paper. But how can you, me, and individuals protect the ecosystem so that we don't die quicker than we're supposed to die? Because it
Right.
seems like ecosystem is all causing us to have life.
Exactly. It's all really in everything that we do. And so there are a few simple things we could do. One is making sure what our water use, that we're conserving our water use, that we don't waste our water. And
Mm-hmm.
then on top of that, if we plant a tree, I'm a big advocate of planting trees. I love tree planting programs because they're very practical, especially fruit trees, because you could plant a tree, you could plant some mangroves, you can, especially a fruit tree, let's say a mango tree, breadfruit tree. I personally believe every yard should at least have 5 to 10 fruit trees, depending on the size of the yard. You could have a
Mm-hmm.
mango tree, you could have a soursop, because they don't need a lot of space. You could have a
Okay.
breadfruit tree, and those trees there, you can have a sour tree or an orange tree or a lime
Mm-hmm.
tree, and then you can eat. You could make some switcher. You could cook the breadfruit. You could eat the mangoes.
Mm-hmm.
Eat the soursop. Help, because soursop has been related with anti-cancer properties, and we have a higher rate of cancer in the Bahamas for our small
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
population. So if we're able to incorporate these healthy styles, healthy activities bit by bit, as a community, we could build a better environment. And
Right.
so, and so this is an example where we had a program that Bahamas partnered with the region. It was called Carafill Alliance. It was a non-government organization, and it was to have a goal of planting 1 million trees in the region. So we pledged to plant 100,000 trees.
Right.
And we did this with very little money. The Forestry Unit partnered with NGOs locally, especially the Sustainable Lifestyles, who led the charge, and they coordinated all the volunteers. So, for example, all those pots were donated. So
Mm-hmm.
that was from a development. They're like, we're just going to throw these in the landfill. Do you want them? Yes, we want them.
Right.
Please, give them to us. People who ate mangoes and avocados gave us their seeds. Great,
Right.
because then every fruit that you eat has a seed. Well, it should.
Yeah.
It should have a seed. If it doesn't have a seed, you should question that. But
Yep.
this
Yep.
is an
Mm-hmm.
example of continually giving. That's called sustainability. That is something where you're able to use the resource today, but ensure that there's a resource for the future generations to use and benefit from.
Cool. So now, we always say that that's only the bush. We just dismiss that, cut it all down, no harm. We can grow it back. We ain't losing nothing, kind of thing, and so forth and so forth. Why is this mindset dangerous?
Oh, it's extremely dangerous. It's dangerous because what if it doesn't grow back as well as it should, or it takes longer to grow back? So that means that what may have taken, I don't know. Well, let's take example the size of our trees. We're used to seeing skinny trees like a small DBH, a small
Okay.
diameter.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the history of the Bahamas, like writings that were done, the explorers in the 1700s and the 1800s, we had large mahogany trees, large, meaning like 2 feet wide, 3 feet wide, tall trees. Boats were built out of these. We have the story of the mahogany trees being sent from the loyalists being sent up to Harvard, and that part of the wood that is in the libraries is actually from the Bahamas.
Right.
These would have been massive trees compared to us.
Right.
But this would have been the first generation of trees. What we see now around our communities are fourth and fifth and sixth generation plantations or trees.
Okay.
So as you could see, as it grows, each generation, it doesn't grow back as tall and as strong and as thick because it's not being preserved. We're interfering with it. It's what they called anthropogenic interference, anthropogenic causes. So we have this pressures of development that the trees now, so we're stressing out the trees. So they're trying to adapt, but the benefits that we would have experienced in the 17 or 1800s, let's say, we're not experiencing now because we're not allowing the trees to grow for hundreds of years. If at most, maybe 10, 15, until we're like, oh, we need to clear cut everything and build a house.
Right.
So we cut the lot and build a house. And then we're like, oh, we need to get some vegetation and some trees. So we bring in the soil and we bring in plants that are not indigenous or they're not native, right? And they require a lot more water, a lot more care. They require fertilizer now. They require more soil because when they cleared the lot, they also raked up the soil and graded it. So then they took that. And then think of it, the way that we build, we're like, oh, let's put some fill on the lot. And so packing it down, and as you know, the more that you pack it down and the more you drive over that, it almost becomes like concrete and it's not porous. So it doesn't drain well.
In terms of that, then you're getting into the question I was going to ask, which basically is that we're building these 100-foot sidewalks in the bush, as I call it, right? Because, like you mentioned, we had some commentary on the news from in the house about clearing down property to build and stuff, and there's certain rules that we're supposed to be. And that very same week, 2 properties in my neighborhood cleared everything. And then, like you said, they dumped a couple yards of soil on, fill on it and roll it down and stuff like that. And then all the water ended up in the road. So walk us through that process of when people do that.
Right.
What does that cause? Because that obviously is not good. At least I don't think it's good.
No, because so we have limestone. So our what we call rock, right? The hard rock, what we break up for quarry and such. It's a limestone, and it is actually very porous. So that means it has great filtration system. So it filters down into our water table, which is great when you allow time and everything like that. But what we're finding out now, because we're like, oh, we need to improve our property, we need to add more fill to add height so it doesn't flood. And then we don't recognize that by doing that, we're taking away our land's ability to filter, to actually look for a place for the water to go. It's just like when we fill in the mangroves and we're surprised that, oh, why is water coming here? Because traditionally that's where water goes. Water would go, that would be, and mangroves are kind of like our kidneys of the earth. They take the dirty water and they're able to filter it, and then it goes and it makes clean water for us, right? So with that, if you have one house who does it, so it's like, okay, it's a little bit of water, but you just gave it a perfect example. You had 2 areas in 2 lots in your area that did it, then immediately you saw a difference where those lots that would have normally absorbed the water no longer absorb the water, but the water always finds some place to go. And it will go on the road, it will go in other people's lots, because it's trying to find somewhere to go. And if we keep closing up the areas for it to go, then that means it's just going to be in our yards. And so, and causing flooding. So I know a person's like, okay, just dig a deep well and let the water go. That's only going to work for a certain amount of time. Why? because sea level is rising. So if you have a sea level that's rising, where's the water going to go?
Like Pinewood.
Yes. Where and that was the joke when people are like, oh, I at least I don't live in Pinewood. I don't live in Pinewood. I'm not going to flood. But we could see this year, especially in May, I have to reference that where we had this. It's almost like a freak event storm.
Right.
Well, that's the effect of climate change, where weather patterns are now becoming unpredictable. Where we had nearly the same level of rain that we would have in a category 3, because within 24 hours we had nearly 10 inches of rain, unheard of.
Right.
So yes, you had that, but at the same time, you had nearly 400 acres of pine forest that has been cleared over a year. So in areas in Carmichael Road in the Western District that never would have flooded, flooded majorly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we can touch on to that when we come back after this little short break. But before we go to the break, then we only do things when we see a benefit, a personal benefit. We don't change. If we riding a bike, or we're not gonna go to something else, put on our helmet, because when we get knocked down, we know we're gonna dead. We still ain't gonna do it until one of our friends die or something like that. Then we might do it. So how can we protect the environment to benefit us as individuals? What can be done to incentivize us to want to do? Well, what can we say to people so that they would know why they need to do it? How it's affecting them directly?
Okay.
I asked it 3 different ways. So
yes, I'm like, that's a very complex question. But at the root, you're like, how do we make people recognize the impact for them? Right? How do we get them to understand the importance of the environment? Because we could say the environment all day long, save, conserve this. And people are like, yeah, whatever, I'm still going to do what I want to do. How is it going to impact? Well, we have to. So, for example, our prime minister is really focused on climate change and finding a way for the Bahamian people to survive what is coming up next, because we recognize that we have to prepare as a nation. We have to mitigate. We have to conserve what we have. We have to adapt. We have to build better to recognize that sea level is rising. And as a nation that is an archipelagic nation, meaning multi-islands that has low elevation, that means that most of our country, over 60 or 70% of our country, is within that range that is expected to have sea level rise. That is concerning for anybody.
Yeah.
And so how do we get people to care? This concept of blue carbon has been buzzing around, right? So blue carbon, what does that really mean? We recognize that our seagrasses are highly valuable. They have a high level of sequestering carbon, meaning absorbing carbon. That means our sea, we're mostly sea. We have 100,000 square miles of sea in our exclusive economic zone, in our boundaries. And what we're trying to do is find a value for that. And the fact that we're able to find a value, meaning this concept of carbon credits, quote unquote, the Paris Agreement, those things that are buzzing around, we are diligently working together to see, okay, how can the Bahamas benefit from accessing these big sources of money that is available? And so one thing is conserving our environment. So if you could consider every mangrove tree that is impacted, or seagrass tree, or pine tree, and you cut that down and you're removing our chance to have money. That is a dollar value. And we've been able to prove that there's a dollar value associated with every species. And so what we're doing is we're trying to highlight the fact of where it is, count how much it is, prove how much we have, to then say, okay, we could then say that in the excess that we have, we could then sell that.
Right.
And that is that concept of carbon credits. So if we could then say to the average person, hey, we want to keep that tree, because the more trees we keep and document, and then we're able to quantify and then say, okay, yes, we're maintaining our levels, we're maintaining our credit, we're maintaining our capital, and then
Right.
the principal, we're maintaining the principal, and then all of the interest that we're able to then leverage, we would then benefit from that. So if that could be the difference of, let's say, oh, if we kept this area, that would be a benefit over a 20-year period of, let's say, $10 million in ecosystem services and able to credit the nation. And then if you remove it,
right,
then you're like, we just lost $10 million.
Right. Yeah. But you say $10 million, but I deal in the billions, because I say we have $100 billion economy, and it's built on 5 pillars.
Right.
Sun, sea, digital, and people. And so at some point in time, we can catch up to that. And this administration seems to be catching up in a fast way. And I don't know. We will see what happens in the long run, which is good. At least we're going in the right direction at this point in time.
Definitely. I would say in my whole career, I would say this is the most proactive I've ever seen an administration in supporting not just the initiatives and the agreements that the Bahamas has agreed to internationally, but also ensuring that we as technical officers, we in the government are able to do our job. We're able to then say, this is what we need. We need to validate these numbers. We're able to go and do the research, and we're able to help influence policy that will benefit the Bahamas. And it takes time, yes, but I would say that this is something that whole concept of national development, this is where you have that national development concept, where you have to keep this not just for a political administration, but for the conservation of your nation, preservation of your nation. This is what is needed.
Yeah, well, we can touch into some of that part of it, not too much, but on the other side of the break. So, Madam Producer, we've been listening to something to think about with Dale Happy Knowles, and we have the acting director of the Forestry Unit of Environment, the Ministry of Environment, on the show, and we're discussing how to get that 100-foot sidewalk that we put in the bush so that we'll know what we need to do with it. We'll be right back.
Sammy's Chicken. There's nothing like it.
Behind every scoop, flick, and savor is a smile and memory being made or reminisced. Whether you're at work, out with family on a Sunday, or have friends visiting, flavor will meet expectations in our 32-ounce container for only $10 if you're having a special event as well. Exotic flavors ranging from soursop to Guinness is definitely worthwhile. Welcome back to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. And we're here talking this evening with the Acting Director of Forestry Unit,
Danielle Hanek, and we're talking about why building those 100-foot sidewalks through the bush ain't being a good start to our paradise. Welcome back, madam.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for having me. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Bahamas and the world.
Yes. Yes, 242 to the world. So
Yes.
we talked a little bit about the weather and the sidewalk and the building habits and so forth. But in that storm that you mentioned, that freak of nature, as we say, storm,
Yes.
that caused some major disruption because we still by the airport and tropical gardens still have a major problem every rain that goes. And during that storm, I believe, well, I couldn't go anywhere, so I believe you would have highlighted that the actual police was not able to respond from that station.
Right. Recently, we've been become very good friends with our with the Royal Bahamas Police Force, especially the Western Station and the Carmichael Road Station. And so 2 weeks ago, we were just there, doing some other matters and talking about that same storm that happened in May. And so the officer in charge, she advised, she's just like, she's been working on that station for over 10 years. And she said that was the first time that they were landlocked. They could not drive anywhere. Blake Road was flooded. Coral Harbor Road was flooded. The JFK, that portion right there, I guess it's technically JFK, right in front of before Old Port Bay shopping plaza, where you saw the stories of cars getting stuck and having to be towed out. That is the first time that has ever happened. And so, I mean, that I could recall where then, and so she's just like, their vehicles, they had calls and they could not respond. They could not move because then they would get stuck. They didn't have a 4x4 truck, let's say, or a trailer to drive. So that was just amazing that persons in all facets of the island were actually able to say that event impacted them. That is powerful. Because that means that just showcases how vulnerable we really are. And that was just one event. That was just a few hours of rain. And what if it was a storm? What if it was a storm? That just shows that how all I could say is how vulnerable we really are as a nation.
Right. And our quality of life is affected by it. And when we had the hurricane, the Cat 5 that missed us and went between us and Andres and the like, my brother always said that if that would come up to Nassau, to New Orleans from the south, then almost all of the south of the island would have been underwater. And that was because that went on to mess up Abou and Grand Bahama.
Yes. And so even, yes, Hurricane Dorian 2019. And I can recall right before Hurricane Dorian, people were like, we have a habit of saying a hurricane party because a hurricane, it was right before the weekend. And you're like, oh, we're just going to have a hurricane party. No one really took it seriously. And because it accelerated and then you never knew, you just didn't expect it to rest so long. It was a very slow moving storm. And especially how it just sat over Grand Bahama for hours, like over 24 hours. It just didn't even move. So like those are things you can't even plan for. And so in terms of that, you're just like, okay, New Providence was blessed that it did not impact. And even though we had no direct hit, people were still affected. And I think, is it in Yamacraw Beach area, persons still got flooded. And so imagine if that was a direct hit. You can't imagine it. And then on top of it, like, so when I did when I started out in the service and we did GIS and computer mapping, meaning, and there's a topographical layer where you could see the elevations of the islands. And so if you say that an average storm surge back then would be like 20 feet, now we saw there were storm surges in Abou and Grand Bahama that were 40 feet tall. But let's say the average basic modeling of New Providence, you would then impact over 70% of the island.
Right. Cool.
Think
So,
about that.
Dr.
Where are we
Jean,
going?
yeah, we can touch on that a little bit. Where we go. That's part of what we always talk about. But Dr. Jean Turnquist, hi Jean, says, not hi Jean, hi, Aunt Jean. Great topic, and our guest is very knowledgeable. We only need to put small, simple changes in place and achieve great benefits. Thank you so much for your thoughts-provoking session. Cool. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, and share. Make sure the whole world know, because that's how we're going to change the thing. And that was actually my next question. How do we teach people to know the importance of the environment and to use their own individual powers to affect the change that we need? And so one of the things that if our listeners and those who can watch can share the links all over and ask people to watch them, ask all of the schools to watch it so that they can learn and teach the children, all the teachers, and so teach the children. So how would you comment on Madam Turnquist's?
Yes, it's a small changes because I believe many hands make light work. So if each of us in our communities are able to do one part, 2 parts, then we would then all benefit. So for example, if I buy a lot in a subdivision, try not clearing down the whole lot. How about you just clear down the footprint and maybe a little buffer that you need to put your house. Maybe instead of having a cement foundation, that brick foundation, what if you have pillars?
Right.
Like how we had stilts. But you have, so you modify the way or design of your home. How about instead of, like how we said, instead of clearing down the lots and everything, if you have a tree that's on your lot, instead of saying you're going to just clear cut the tree, you don't care if it's protected or not, you just want your house the way you want it. How about you look at the layout of your lot and say, maybe I could change the design and maybe it could benefit me, so lower electricity bills. You'd have a cooler breeze. You'd always you wouldn't have to worry about having such a high light bill, for example. You could even build with the windows facing like how you're using the design. So you're saying, okay, in the direction of the sun, so that you would have lighting in or using the different types of windows. Those are all small changes we could figure out. But definitely planting a tree, reducing waste, meaning like picking up garbage, especially on the beach, that impacts our wildlife. And even our mangroves, if you see someone filling in a mangrove, do you know that our mangroves, like every fish that we eat, every conch that we want to eat, what we love as a part of our diet, all of them go, or in the I call them the fish nursery, the estuary is in the mangroves. And so this is a highly important. So if we want to keep eating snappers and groupers and conchs, or if we want our bonefish industry to keep thriving, we need to conserve our mangroves and we need to plant more of them. And even mangroves are our buffers for waves. For example, when you have those hydrological events, when you have the hurricanes, when you have the storm surges, they are our first line of defense. So for example, that same Davis Creek example that we were talking about earlier, Davis Creek in Central Andros. I know with going there, people harvest sand from the beach and they're like, oh, that's harmless. I'm just taking some sand from the beach. I need to do a project around the home. But do you know, the more that you take sand, if I take some sand, you take some sand, everyone takes sand from the beach. That sand was actually a part of a dune system that would help prevent flooding.
Right.
But now when the waves come, there's nothing to stop the waves. And now they're coming in the road. Now the water is coming in the road and it's coming to now affect our homes. And we're wondering, why is that? We just moved some sand. But it's not just saying you move some sand. If everyone moves sand, you have the tragedy of the commons. Where it's just like, because you're not conscious, and it's like little by little it erodes. But just like that, little by little, we could build it back. Yeah. And so having those small activities, yes.
Yeah. So one of those activities then is, we don't separate from our conch. People keep talking about how we need to put a period of ban for the year because our conch it's getting overfished and the like and stuff like that. So is that because of overfishing or because our mangroves and the like that you say where they grow is being depleted?
But everything is connected, Dale. So if we are reducing its habitat, if we are, for example, have you ever noticed, like let's say at Manicuring, where they just throw the old conch shells in the sea,
Right.
and you're like, oh, it looks so like it's dying, nothing's living here. And so imagine the point of view from the conch when you're like,
Right.
oh, they just killed my friend and they put its body right here, I'm gonna move. And so meaning it's we need to have a season. The data that we are seeing is that our conch stocks, we are one of the few countries that doesn't have a season at all, from it not being extinct. So in Jamaica they have a season, for example.
Right.
We need to have a season if we want to ensure that we could have conch over time. So look at the success of our grouper season. Our grouper season helped conserve our grouper stocks, so we're able to have grouper throughout the season. And then you fish well, and you allow the species to have its babies, to be juveniles, and to grow, and then to come back. So you give it that opportunity.
Yeah, well, we will have to have some serious conversations on that, because if we think lockdowns cause some mental issues in our Bahamas and taking conch away from people for a period of time could do some serious things. But that leads me right into the question that we always ask here, is that we talk about things that we could do, but what could the government do to help us? Or what do we need to do to the government to cause them to do things to help us?
That's such a loaded question.
Yeah, but you're sitting in the seat, so I got to ask you that question.
So for me, where I sit, having fruit trees in every yard, especially in urban areas, that would be an activity that I'm focusing on. So I have a pilot project idea where you could focus on at least having 5 to 10 fruit trees, depending on the size of the lot. If they're vacant lots, working with persons in the community to say, are they willing to allow us to put fruit trees there? Within 2 to 3 years, those trees are going to fruit.
Right.
And that would not just feed the persons in that community, that is a business opportunity. Look at the Connect small business owners, or look at the breadfruit small business owners. Look at the coconut water conglomerate that you see around. These are opportunities, micro investments in communities where you are not just tackling food security, but you are giving an avenue for economic growth. You're allowing persons to have an income, to work, to have that honor of earning a salary legally, right? And so it has multiple benefits in the community. And so that is something that I think is practical, it's feasible. We could promote planting a fruit tree, promote the agricultural programs at the high schools and junior schools of having a fruit forest. And so that gives something tangible. Can give, especially giving youth an opportunity to interact with the environment in a healthy way and understand, oh, so this is what this does. It actually does benefit me. I do feel better when I walk in this forest, or I have my hands in the dirt and I'm planting a seedling, or I'm planting a mangrove, and I can understand that this is my part, that I am helping this. I think that is something that could give us pride in our environment and pride in how we live, and also tackle the basic thing of, if you're hungry, eat a fruit. So these are tangible, practical ways that we could work with communities to say, while you're doing this, yes, you're planting a fruit tree. Yes, you're going to get fruit, but guess what? You're going to improve your air quality in the area. This is going to help us replenish the water table in this area. This may cut down on your electricity bill because it won't be so hot, And so these are practical benefits that persons could see, and over time, they could then recognize that. So I could give you an example real quick. This gentleman, he came in, he's just like, I'm tired of the silk cotton tree in my backyard. I want to cut it down. No problem. He's just like, yeah, I'll plant a fruit tree on the other side of the house. I saw him like maybe 2 years later. And he's like, do you know that my electricity bill went up by like $200 and $300? Because of where the tree was. His house was always in shade. He didn't think about it. And so he was just annoyed about the leaves of the tree. but he never thought of the benefits. Now he has to be conscious about, oh, I have to cut off my AC. And so now he has a bill. And those are small things. So imagine that multiplied out in a community.
So is the what's it called? Forestry Unit in your mind running on high octane, is a high performance unit organization, or do we, the citizen, need to go and beat on some doors and say we want to energize and empower your unit and your sister units so that we could get this environmental thing right?
Yes, I think, well, government is reactionary. It loves to have the feedback of the public, believe it or not. So the outcry and the demand from the public will actually help empower us to get the resources we need to meet that demand. So I would say that working with our communities, and I think that's the thing, our Department of Environmental Planning and Protection, we have new laws now that protect our environment. And so the fact that we need a certificate of environmental clearance to do anything with our land, this is what we need to educate persons on, that, okay, if you want to do this, or even if you want to harvest a protected tree, we have 137 protected trees in the country. So if you want to move it, we work with people to say, okay, but if you move this tree, then I have to replant 3 trees to replace it. And so that is something that we need to do. So we need more staff. We're a very small unit. We are only like 10 people or 11 people, and we need more staff. We need more resources, and just to plant out trees and to get communities involved, so that common verbiage would be carbon sequestration, blue carbon, knowing that the fruit and the different fruit trees and different protected trees, you'd know what a lignum vitae looks like, you know what mahogany or horseflesh looks like. And so these are opportunities to say, bring that in our awareness. So the bush is not a place to hide your dirt, but instead it is somewhere to conserve and to actually grow with.
Yeah, no, they leave my bush alone now, because the bush, from my little biology in school, what I learned is that trees, they suck up all the carbon and put out the oxygen, and that's what I need to live. So we need to protect those things. But as we close up a little bit here now, just give us a snapshot then of all of these things we talked about, because we didn't really touch on the on a couple of things, but give us a snapshot of all of the things and how they interact, and then what can we do to help you make your job better.
So trees, when we're thinking in the Bahamas, our pine forest, our coppice forest, or coppet as they say in the South, or our mangrove forest, they're all connected in how we interact with our land. But our land interconnects with our sea. And that transition area is our mangrove areas. And so our fish industry, our conch industry, our bonefish industry, the blue carbon, the ability for the plants in the sea. So for example, the seagrass, which is essential in holding carbon, they're all interconnected. And so us doing what is it? It's that Bible verse that says the little foxes spoil the vine. So eat little by little. We actually need, as a collective, to then say, okay, we're not going to build in this area because we're going to conserve this area. This is essential for our water table. It is something that we need to conserve for us. So we're going to say that we're going to, over here, use our land more efficiently, change the way we design, actually put in biotic corridors, meaning areas or buffer zones that could then have fruit trees and other indigenous trees that could help balance the loss of what happened in Carmichael Road area, so that you increase the greenery in the community, so that you have a benefit not just in certain sides of the island, but everyone could benefit.
Right.
So those are little activities that we could do. So the importance of our coppice is really just the broadleaf trees that we have, and all of that balance is really high biodiversity. So many species. We have an average of at least 40 species that we would see in our pine and in our coppice forest on a given day. And so the importance of our birds, our butterflies, our all of our insects, our bees, All of this works together in the ecosystem of life. And we cannot exist without trees, and trees could exist without us, but we cannot exist without trees. And I think that's the thing. We cannot eat a red mangrove or a pine tree, but we definitely need it to eat, and we need it to live. We need it to breathe. We need to have water. We need to have a safe environment. We're protected from storms. These are all benefits that we benefit from. So really, it's quite selfish that if we could invest in something, invest in our environment, invest in our trees, and invest in how we could build better.
Cool. I mean, and that's the paper of the day, folks. Vote for Danielle Hanek. So anyway, but seriously though, we want to thank you very kindly for taking the time to be with us this evening to lend us this enlightening nuggets that you know. We know you have to rush off for another event.
Thank you.
So forth. So we really appreciate it, and we may bring you back to deal with something else in a more detailed
Thank
way.
you. Thank you. And you were right, Dale. An hour does go quickly. I was a bit worried, but you were right.
Yeah. Cool. Alrighty. So we'll be in touch.
Well, thank you so much, and have a safe night, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Dale. All right.
Folks, you've been listening to Something to Think About. I keep saying listening. You've been watching. If you're watching and listening, if you can only listen, Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. It's been a really enlightful evening, learning a lot. So much more to discuss on the table. But as you can see, the energetic bunny, Ms. Hanek, was really, really fluent in providing, or generous, I should say, in providing details. And there's so much that we could do in order to improve and to understand how we are interacting with each other and the ecosystems, and some of the simplest things that we take for granted and think that it doesn't matter has a big impact on the whole picture of how we deal with climate change, food security, etc., and all those good things. Just remember, folks, don't make any more of those 100-foot sidewalks in the bush, because they're going to come back to haunt you later. That's when we clear all of the stuff in the mangroves and the wet fields. And so we block water from transiting where it needs to go, and so forth. And these things come back to haunt us, because then we have these catastrophic events and the process doesn't flow. That's like you cutting off your veins or your food line down your esophagus, down to your stomach, and then you can't eat and this and that. All those things work together. So let's make sure we learn it and try and figure it out so we could be. All you on social media, thank you for tuning in and enjoying the show. If you want to watch more shows, hit the like button, share. Let all your friends know so that they can know that this is the channel to tune into, so that they could get all of the good information to help us grow from strength to strength. Madam Producer, thank you kindly. 242, we're out.
Enjoyed the show? Then subscribe to us for more educational and inspirational content. Ring the bell so you never miss a show. Let's change the narrative, 242.